Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. Many of you, probably most of you, have heard about the apparitions of our Blessed Mother to Fatima. Some of you may have heard of Lourdes, where she appeared to Bernadette Subaru. Maybe some of you have heard of Medjugorje. Our guest today, Glenn Hudson, is here to talk about our mother's appearances at Garabandal, Spain. Glenn Hudson is the current leader. I didn't want to say founder of the Garabandal apostolate in America here. That was started by Joey Lomangino, and he has since passed away, and Glenn has carried the torch. But it's not just about talking about Garabandal. He's actually, as I joked with him before we went on the air, BFFs with Conchita, who is the main Garabandal seer. So one last thing I want to say before I welcome our guest is our mother has been appearing around the world furiously. In these last several centuries, it has just ramped up, and there is a message that she is telling. And that's why today's show is especially urgent, because Glenn is going to help tell us or put together a little bit more clearly this picture of what happened in Garabandal. What are the messages? What can we do to prepare? So I know that's a really long intro, Glenn, but I want to first start by saying thank you so much for making time to be on the Breakfast with Bacon show.
Well, thank you, Christine, for having me. I appreciate it.
So you know Conchita very well. Before we talk about how you know her, can you tell us what is Garabandal for the people who don't know the brief history of those apparitions?
Sure. So Garabandal is a town in northern Spain in the mountains, and the Blessed Mother appeared there for 4 years consecutively from 1961 through 1965. And she appeared to 4 girls. Now, all of the girls didn't receive 4 years worth of visions, but Conchita did. That's why she's considered the main visionary. And she was also entrusted with the date of a future miracle, which we'll get into later. Mm-hmm. So not only did she teach these girls daily lessons about how we should all live, but she also left some prophecies for the future. Now, you mentioned Joey Lomangino in the beginning. I am not the founder, but Joey was the founder of this apostolate, and I work with him at the New York Garabandal Center with Conchita. I was the director of public relations for Joey. And in 2009, we had a video out, but I decided to take Facebook and use that as a medium to promote the video. And then I also got the permission from both of them. I said, let me set up some, live interactive questions and answers, because there's no other site that does that. That I know of that answers questions around the clock pretty much.
Yeah.
And now I've expanded that into 14 languages. But Joey's story is amazing. Joey's a 16-year-old boy working for the family business, goes to fill up the family truck with a tire, and the tire explodes and creases his forehead so that he actually goes blind and loses his sense of smell. Due to olfactory nerves that are severed. And he goes into a coma. And he does this on the feast day of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. He wakes up in July from the coma on July 16th, remarkably on the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. But he is blind and has no sense of smell. But he continues to work for the family business. And as he gets into his 30s, he's very tired, and his uncle suggests a trip to Italy. And during that trip, he brings Joey to confession to Padre Pio, who we all know could read souls in confession. Yeah. And he tells Joey, is that all? And Joey says, yeah, that's all I'm going to confess. And Jay says, well, there's more. And he goes on to tell Joey everything that he's done wrong. And Joey is obviously, like anybody would be, distraught. And he says, don't worry, Joey, you're going to be okay. And he gives him advice to change his life. 2 years later, 1963, Joey goes back again sees Padre Pio, and confession again. And afterwards, he's talking with Padre Pio, and Padre Pio comes up and rubs Joey's forehead, and instantly Joey has a restored sense of smell, which is physically impossible because the nerves are severed. It's like wires being cut. And he smells roses, and he's actually taken back from it. He's shocked and
yeah, because he hadn't smelled in years.
Yeah. So he's thanking Padre Pio, obviously, and he remarks that I understand that the Blessed Mother is supposed to be appearing in this town, Garabandal. Is it true? And Padre Pio says, yes, it's true. And he says, should I go? And he says, yes, certainly. And this is how it starts. Joey and his uncle go to Garabandal. Joey becomes friends with Conchita, and his uncle during that visit takes pictures of the apparitions that are going on and some of the miracles. And when he comes back home to New York, he puts them in a photo album and puts Braille captions underneath them. And Joey actually starts almost a door-to-door campaign to tell people about Garabandal.
And he's still blind, right?
And yes, he's still blind.
Mm-hmm.
So that he started it literally, this apostolate, out of his house in Lindenhurst, New York. And later on, you'll hear how my involvement came to meet him and get involved with them. But that's how this whole story started, especially here in America. And then through Joey's talks and videos, spread to the whole world.
Did he ever get his sight restored?
No.
He didn't, but he could smell again.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how did he meet Conchita while he was there?
Yes. Yes, that's how they became friends. They were lifelong friends. And Conchita, living here at New York, also occasionally would come down to the Garabandal Center. And it really was entrusted to Joey to disseminate the day of the miracle that's coming. Conchita knows when it is, and she's was going to release that to Joey on 8 days before. But now that Joey has passed, I think that responsibility is going to fall into my lap, along with some other people.
Because there's a priest over in Spain, isn't there, that she is going to tell, and he's going to release that message, or am I confusing that?
Yeah, no, there's a list. I have a laundry list of people to contact.
But you do?
Yes. Joey made me make a list of media corporations and specific people. And this was all the way back in the 90s. I had a list made. So it's had to have been updated and changed many times and lengthened.
Right.
There'll be several people that will get this date announced.
So tell me about these messages. When she started appearing in 1961, did she appear to all four of them at the same time? Did she appear to them individually? Did she speak and not make herself seen? I know that there's some people that understand the Garabandal visions, but not fully.
Yeah, it was a mixture of, sometimes she would appear to all of them, which was most of the time in the very beginning. There were times when she would appear to sets of them. And I always thought that was interesting that she would appear to sets of them, almost like
right.
Jesus had disciples in pairs later on going out into the world. But if there was a specific message for one, she would appear to one. But in the beginning, mostly all four girls would have been appeared to.
What kind of messages was she spreading? Was it the same as we get in Akita or Fatima, or just repent, or are there more specific messages that were delivered in that 4-year period of time?
Well, there was a combination of messages. There were daily messages, which I mentioned earlier, and those were just guidelines for the girls on how to live. Mm-hmm. And those would consist of lessons of humility, piety, modesty, reverence for the Eucharist, the Rosary, reverence for priests. So there was those daily messages that she spread out over time. And then she also gave two specific messages over the course of those 4 years for the general public, for the world. I have those if you want me to read them
I
too.
would love for you to read them.
Sure. I'm gonna put on my reading glasses so that there's no errors.
Yeah.
So the first one is from October 18th, 1961. We must make many sacrifices, perform much penance, visit the Blessed Sacrament frequently, but first we must lead good lives. If we do not, a chastisement will befall us. The cup is already filling up, and if we do not change, a very great chastisement will come upon us. The second message was on June 18th, 1965. As my message of October 18th has not been complied with, it has not been known to the world. I am advising you that this is the last one. Before the cup was filling up, now it is flowing over. Many cardinals, many bishops, and many priests are on the road to perdition and taking many souls with them. Less and less importance is being given to the Eucharist. You should turn the wrath of God away from yourselves by your efforts. If you ask his forgiveness with sincere hearts, he will pardon you. I, your mother, through the intercession of Saint Michael the Archangel, ask you to amend your lives. You are now receiving the last warnings. I love you very much and do not want your condemnation. Pray to us with sincerity, and we will grant your requests. You should make more sacrifices. Think about the passion of Jesus.
Okay, so I've got a couple things. So she said in 65, you guys didn't heed the warnings I gave in the beginning at 61. So were the children told to tell somebody, and were they supposed to do anything? I know like at Fatima, where the Pope was supposed to release a message in 1960 and he didn't. Was there anything like that at Garabandal where, okay, here it is 4 years later, no one's doing anything? How is that message supposed to have gotten out and to whom?
Well, the message really was conveyed to not only the townspeople, but the visitors. And obviously, once the apparitions started almost on a daily basis and physical miracles could be seen, slowly people's belief in Garabandal took hold, and they would, there was an influx of visitors and pilgrimages. And this is the funny thing, is that the media had a chance to spread this message and film some of these physical miracles that were happening, and really didn't. So unfortunately, it fell upon just a few people to really, over all these decades, to just keep at it every day, promoting the messages, like myself.
Yeah. What were some of the miracles that they could have filmed that were taking place there?
Well, this is a town of about 300 people at the time, with literally no electricity, if you can imagine that. So there's no televisions, no radios, things like that.
I spent 2 weeks in Tanzania in the Maasai tribe. I know exactly how that is.
So it was very rural, but there were significant supernatural phenomenon. It started with the rosary, because the girls are 11 and 12 years old. And while they know bits of prayers, they don't know how to do a rosary. So Mary actually taught them the rosary. Wow. And there are recordings of that. I have them, if people want to hear them later on, I'll show them how, bits and pieces of it. So first of all, their parents were amazed, like, how can you do the rosary? Right. I didn't really teach it to you yet. So that was the first miracle. The second one were doctors testing the girls. And it started out innocently, when they would be in an ecstatic state, by pinching them, grabbing them, and the girls would have no reaction. And it went on to somewhat more serious tests of sticking them with pins and needles and no reaction. To the point where they would try to burn them with a match, and there'd be no reaction. They would take sand and throw it in their eyes just to try to get them to blink, and they wouldn't blink. They would flash camera bulbs in their eyes, try to get them to blink. That wouldn't work. The girls could physically lift each other to kiss Mary during a vision.
But we could lift them, right?
Yeah, two men couldn't lift a 12-year-old girl off the ground. There was a Polaroid taken of Mary during one of the apparitions by Conchita. This is the only apparition that I know of in the world that had a recording of Mary's voice. She was actually recorded on tape at one point. They were asking her to leave a message for people, and she actually said, "No, I won't speak." And that was recorded. And the girls came down the mountain. They played it once, and that was it. After that, it disappeared from the tape. Some of the more amazing miracles, or when the influx of people came in from pilgrimages, they understand that Mary would kiss sacramental items. So they had to put out a table, and people would pile up rosaries and scapulars and wedding rings. And the girls, one by one, without looking only at Mary, they would take the item off the table, they would lift it to her to kiss, and they could, by looking up, never looking at anyone, they were able to physically return it to the proper holder of that item. Mary could spot priests who were trying to be incognito. They dress in civilian clothes, and she would tell the girls, so-and-so is a priest, just to let them know. And probably the biggest, most convincing phenomenon was something called the little miracle. And what happened was Mary actually predicted 15 days in advance, so there would be plenty of notice, that a Eucharist would appear on Conchita's tongue. So it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. They actually had to build some fencing around Conchita because there was hundreds and hundreds of people. They were right on top of her. There were cameras and film running, and she stuck out her tongue. There was nothing on it. And then an illuminated host appeared on her tongue as Mary predicted. Wow. So that's pretty amazing. When you take all of these physical miracles together, it's quite convincing that that she was there.
I mean, yeah, I could listen to this stuff all the time, because it's like she obviously chose them that time. She appeared in Fatima in 1917. I think Lourdes was 18 something, but here we are now moving into the 60s. And it's not yet approved. It's not discouraged, right? The church hasn't fully said this is worthy of belief yet, or have they? What stage are they in the Garabandal visions?
Well, it breaks down into the bishops and the Vatican. So the Vatican has not declared anything yet. It's quite a long story. The original bishop in Garabandal of Santander, Bishop Fernandez, was against the apparitions, not for any reason of cause. It's kind of a long story, and you can Google the town in Spain, but it's called Ezquioga. In 1931 through 33, the Blessed Mother appeared in this town to a 7-year-old boy and I think an 11-year-old girl. And she gave very similar messages of, you should do penance, sacrifices. There's going to be a miracle one day, and if you don't convert, there'll be a chastisement. The problem was, during this period of time, the government was taken over by socialists. And one of the things socialists and communists do right away is try to wipe out any form of religion, because it controls the people, and they want to control the people. So they went directly after the apparitions and told the church that don't get behind this, don't approve it. And it got so violent between the church and the socialists that they actually disbanded the Jesuit order there. So the church was basically had its hands tied. So they said that they weren't going to approve it, and they wanted the church to condemn it, which they did falsely. So now you fast forward 30 years. Now I've got young girls, just like the other apparition. Mary's appearing with almost the same exact messages, and he doesn't want to hear any of this.
Who?
This is the bishop at the time.
The same bishop. He's still alive.
Fernandez, yeah. And he was only bishop from 1961 to 62. And then the following bishop from Batia from 62 to 65, he didn't want to get involved with this either. So he was just kind of following whatever Fernandez had did. The problem is that Fernandez is being asked by people to make a decision on this. Like, look at what we're seeing every day.
Right.
And so he is forced to form a commission to investigate the apparitions. The problem is that he basically gives them orders, find a way to condemn this. So it's amazing that he appoints some doctors and a priest to head this up. And the priest, after witnessing on a daily basis the events, he resigns from the commission. And years later, he actually becomes the bishop, Bishop Del Gallo.
Oh.
So he has these doctors basically go after Garabandal. And one of the doctors' diagnosis, if you can believe this, is the girls are suffering from illnesses and seizures. That was his medical opinion. So,
did anybody believe that? I mean, I suppose some crazy people. Yeah.
So this commission is so desperate to shut this down. They never, and you will never hear this maybe from anybody else who talks about Garabandal, because nobody's researched it as much as I have. They never interviewed the girls. So how do you put together a report to the Vatican if you never interviewed the girls, never interviewed their parents? They only wanted testimonies from people who didn't believe the apparitions. It got so bad that they actually, a group of doctors took Conchita out of the village to the beach, to a beach town, to get her out of the town. And they started to threaten her. And they said to her, listen, you have to deny these things. If you don't, I'll have you committed to an insane asylum. And I'll have your... Imagine a 12-year-old girl who's so quiet and humble,
Yeah, hasn't even hit puberty.
Children, right? These are not tough kids. These are innocent little kids.
From a town of 300.
Right. They threaten her with an insane asylum. They threaten to put her mother in jail. So it's so bad, they tried to hypnotize her to get this recorded. And as the doctor is trying to hypnotize her, Mary comes and appears to her, and she goes into an ecstatic state and never hears anything.
Oh, that's awesome.
During this visit, they cut off her hair. So you can see in the physical pictures that I have, she has very long hair going down her back that's braided. And then when she comes back from the beach, she has an extremely short haircut because they believed that her hair had some kind of magical powers. So they cut off.
This is in the 60s?
This is 1961.
Wow.
These people would be locked up today for child abuse.
Yeah.
It's criminal. It's so bad that the brigadier of the Civil Guard, Juan Seco, actually puts out in his report calling the commission a farce, because he's watching the girls. He's in charge of protecting the girls and keeping peace in the village, because now obviously there's so many people there. He can't take it anymore. He sees what's going on. He hates the lies so much that he actually puts in his report, and I have that report, that he calls the commission a total fraud and a farce. Now, after all of this goes on, no report is ever sent to the Vatican. So that shows you that the bishop never had any grounds and didn't want to be embarrassed, because people were always asking, Why doesn't the Vatican rule on this? Well, the Vatican couldn't rule on it because
They have no
the
paper.
Vatican didn't have a report. So if you remember, I told you the priest who sat on the commission and then resigned
Yeah.
later becomes Bishop del Valgallo. And in 1987, he finally does a legitimate investigation with, the people that were still alive at that time and could give eyewitness testimony. That report was finally sent to the Vatican. That's the only report that they have.
And the Vatican hasn't yet ruled on it, right?
Well, technically, no. There's been no official ruling, but also another episode has happened. In 1966, in January of 66, obviously, Garabandal is 4 years old now.
Right.
Everybody's heard of it. They've heard about Padre Pio approving it. So Cardinal Ottaviani basically says to the bishop, I want to see Conchita. I want to interview her. And they get a lot of pushback. And so basically he sends out his emissaries to say, I want it here. I don't care who says no, I want her here. And they bring Conchita, her mother, and a doctor, Dr. Mede, to Rome from January 12th, I think, through the 19th. So she goes through a 2.5-hour interview with this cardinal. And at the end of it, one of the Pope's confidants, we'll say his name is I don't have his name, but they called him his confidant, and usually that means the Pope's personal secretary.
Yeah.
At the end of that, he blesses Conchita. The following day, a meeting is set up with Pope Paul VI, and after his meeting with Conchita, he says the famous words, I bless you, and the whole church blesses you. So she received literally a blessing from the second highest ranking person in the Vatican and Pope Paul VI, who was a believer. So that was an excellent confirmation of the validity of Garabandal. But as you know, with Marian apparitions, the onus is upon the local bishop to make a ruling.
Right.
So the Vatican doesn't want to step on bishops' toes because over time, there have been bishops who don't want anything to do with this. They're like, let the Vatican rule. The Vatican is like, well, this you can make a ruling. This is basically your responsibility.
So they just keep passing it back and forth.
Yeah.
To not have to do that.
So, but the interesting thing is that during that meeting, Conchita and the Pope, Conchita revealed the date of the future miracle.
To the Pope.
To the Pope. So they have the date. So in the church's eyes, they're being prudent by saying, well, why don't we just wait till that date comes? And then if the miracle happens, then obviously we can approve it. By then it won't matter.
Right.
But at least they have that date. So that's why the Vatican has never ruled on this. And let's face it, Garabandal is 60 years old. If they wanted to condemn this, they would have condemned this already. And I think it's an affirmation by them not condemning it, not saying anything, that there's enough belief there that they'll wait for the miracle day, and then they'll come out with an approval, which.
Now you don't know the day. You just know that you're one of the ones she will tell 8 days in advance, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What do we know about this miracle?
We know a lot. Conchita basically gave us some guidelines as to when it's going to happen. So through several interviews that I've unearthed, and again, you can see these on my Facebook page, we have ascertained that the month is going to be April. And Conchita already said March, April, or May. So it falls within the guidelines of what Conchita said.
Right.
And this I'm 100% sure of. And again, I can show people that if they want to see the actual interviews. Now, Conchita did give us the hint that it's also going to fall between the 8th and the 16th. So we know it's in April, We know it's between the 8th and 16th. We know from Mary Lowley that under some heated questioning of a priest, and she wouldn't reveal anything about the warning other than to say it's in an even year. The warning I'm talking about now for a second. In another interview later on, she says that the warning and the miracle are in the same year. So that little piece of information now helps us to know it's in April, it's between the 8th and 16th, it's going to be in an even year and the same year as the warning. Conchita went on to tell us that it's going to be at 8:30 at night, Spanish time, and that it would be on the feast of a young martyr of the Eucharist. So a lot of people trying to guess. I've tried for nearly 30 years, and I can discount every name ever given to me. And I've looked at hundreds of names, but there's a criteria list for the martyr, and only one person fits it perfectly, except for his feast day, and that's Saint Tarsus. But
what about someone like Carlos Acunta, who just died, and he's not yet made a saint, and maybe they'd make that date? And no,
the reason is because most people don't know the fact that in 1963, Conchita was entertaining some French people in her home, and they looked on the calendar and they came up with Saint Tarsus's name, and she had no reaction. The problem is he fits the description, except his feast day is in August. So I'm almost at a loss. And like I said, I've gone through hundreds of names, researched this day and night, and I can discount everybody except for Tarsus's, unless maybe the church changes his feast day.
Yeah. And the thing too, then, Glenn, is, we get so tied up in the dates and things, and God's like, no one knows the date nor the hour. And I think we need to really pay more attention to the fact, what is this miracle going to happen for anyway? The warning, as we know, is going to happen so that we all see our consciences and can repent, and we're going to pick sheep or goats, right? We're going to get the mark of the beast or the mark of God. So the purpose of the miracle is what we should focus on. And what do we know about the miracle itself besides the date that it's supposed to happen?
Well, the two most important things are, Conchita said that the miracle basically is the stamp of approval of the warning, that the warning was from God and that this miracle is from God. It's going to be the greatest miracle that Jesus has ever performed. That was Mary's words. So God is basically saying, I'm giving you the warning, and if you don't believe it, now here's the miracle. It will be undeniable. It's from him, and it'll be a confirmation of the warning. So its first purpose is to confirm the warning and the information that you were given. B, it's a miracle that will be there permanently. So it will be a permanent reminder. And the other thing is the added benefit of those people who can actually get to Garabandal that day. Anyone who's sick will be cured, and the unbelievers will be
they will believe.
They'll be converted.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's really a dual purpose of a confirmation and a healing.
Yeah, so God doesn't send his mother just for fun. There's always a purpose. So, it's got to get pretty dire at that point that, God himself is like, I'm going to send this warning to wake you up. You will know the Catholic Church is true. You will know, God or Satan. You're going to make your choice. And then within months, I'm going to send this massive miracle as well. So, God isn't doing that just because he feels like doing a massive miracle, but because he wants to win souls, and he's doing everything in his power, apart from stealing our free will, to get as many of us in heaven as possible. And I think that's why we need to pay attention. This isn't just some sleuth and super sleuth mystery, let's figure out what God's going to do when he's going to do it. Repent today and live a good life. And so, if Conchita was here right now on this video, what would she say is the whole purpose? Would she say that repent and turn to God, or what would she say is the reason for all of this?
Well, we were talking about messages very early on, and we talked about the daily messages. And I also mentioned that she left 3 prophetic messages of three prophetic events. So you obviously have the warning, you have the miracle, but most importantly, she talked about the conditional chastisement. And a lot of people forget that word that I always put in that Conchita said. And she said conditional, because there is no chastisement, there is no punishment if there's a conversion of hearts. So while it may not be likely in some people's opinion that the world
Will change.
will change, I always tell people it's somewhat like a New Year's Eve resolution. It's made with the best of intention, but it isn't followed for very long after that.
Right, right.
So, but it's also very important for people to understand there is hope. Enough of us have to change. And that's the purpose of the warning and the miracle, to convert people to avoid the chastisement. And it's pretty dire. I've read some accounts, not only from the Garabandal girls, which were very brief. They were giving a very short glimpse of it, and it's pretty terrifying. I believe that Conchita said it's like being engulfed from fire from above and below. And Mary Lowley said, I saw rivers of fire and rivers of blood. So it's a pretty horrendous chastisement that we could possibly be facing. So this is really God's last act of mercy.
Yeah, it really is. And the chastisement, the conditional chastisement would come after, you said, after the warning and after the miracle. And then, okay, nothing left. Let's go ahead and.
Right. But the only thing that people ask me all the time, which I have no answer for because none was ever given to any of the girls, which is how much time do we have between the miracle and the chastisement? Is that weeks, months, years? No one knows.
You just better repent today.
Yeah, so that's going to be scary because there's a lot of atheists, there's a lot of agnostics, there's a lot of people that are going to take some convincing.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It is so crazy that after the warning, when God clears up, God does exist, no question of that. When God says the Catholic Church is true, no question of that, 100% will know from infant up that anybody could choose. I have a sister who, there's 4 of us, and I'm all in for Jesus. I have another sister who's totally thinks God is ridiculous. There's no God. And then I have a sister and a brother in the middle who are skeptics. And my skeptic sister said, why doesn't God just show us? I mean, I don't know why. Why does it have to be this mystery and use faith? Why didn't he just tell us he's there and then we're going to do it? And then I didn't know the answer to that years ago, but it occurred to me as I've studied and learned God. I said, especially knowing the warning, I said, Kathy, her name's Kathy. I said, Kathy, it's not about knowledge of God because Satan knew God existed and he chose against him. The warning tells us that everyone will know God exists, but some, baffling to me, will still choose against him. So God is taking out any question of his existence, and then it's just down a plain choice. And I could just stop there because Glenn, I'm like, why? Well, why would have Satan, looking into the face of God, why did he choose what he did? Why did he? I mean, pride must run deep. That, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, the love God has for us has got to be crazy deep. It's eternal, and that he's like, I'm doing everything to get you guys. So, but Glenn, I didn't ask you, and I think some of our viewers want to know, how did you get to be BFFs with Conchita? It's like, so you're this dude in New York, she's over in Spain. How's this connection happen? I know she's here now.
Yeah, she moved here in 1972. There was a Dr. Dominguez, who was a frequent visitor to Garabandal, who had a practice in New York City. And it got to a point where, Conchita couldn't even come out of the house. There were just throngs of people every day. And people are grabbing at her to touch her clothes or touch her, thinking they're going to receive a healing.
Right.
Everybody's asking things of her. Everybody wants her to pray for their particular intentions. So it gets to a point where she can't do anything. And actually, her mother had actually sent her to a boarding school when she was 17, just to get her out of the house and away from the situation. But this doctor befriends her and says, if you want, you can come to America. I'll give you I'll train you as like a medical assistant, and you can work in my office, and we'll help you get on your feet. And she does that. She actually moves to America. But how I got involved with the whole situation as a 13-year-old, I was a pretty big kid. And like most big kids, I loved playing football. So I was playing in a town league, and I wanted to be a linebacker because that was my favorite position. And I would try running faster and faster, but my legs would just hurt so badly the faster I ran. So finally, my mother took me to a doctor, and they diagnosed that I had the beginnings of bone marrow disease in both my legs. And at the same time, one of my aunts lived in the same town as Joey Lomangino. The town is called Lindenhurst in New York. And one of my aunts, this is my mother's sister, Angelina, she would open up her home so that Joey could do talks about Garabandal. So my mother says, I understand that this guy Joey has a medal that's been kissed by the Blessed Mother. And some people that venerate it are getting healings. So why don't we go listen to him? And so I'm 13. What am I going to do?
Yeah, you can't say no to
right.
mom.
I go with her. We listen to Joey. I think I remembered some of it, but at the end, I went up, I kissed the medal, and that was it. 2 weeks later, the doctors, had asked for a set of X-rays of my legs again to confirm the problem. And the new set of X-rays comes out, and my legs are completely clear. Wow. There's no disease. And the doctor is actually argumentative with my mother, like, what are you trying to play a game with us? This can't be the same kid. And, we're both laughing because we knew what happened. I got a miracle.
Did you tell the doctor?
My mother did, but he didn't
really
believe it. 20 years goes by, and one of my aunt's neighbors also opened up her home, and her son, Peter, and I became very good friends because our families knew each other. We were always visiting. Peter calls me one day, and this is 20 years later. He says, hey, you want to come listen to this guy talk about a Marian apparition in Spain? And it's really cool, and some amazing things that happened. And I go, nah, I don't want to hear it,
Yeah.
And he's like, no, come on, just come for a little while. Let's just listen to him for a little while. All right. I walk in Joey's house, not knowing it's Joey's house, and I see Joey Lomangino, and I go, Peter, I know this guy. He goes, how could you possibly know him? I just asked you before. I go, Peter, I met him at my aunt's house, like when I was a kid. I had the healing on my legs. I know him. I know the whole story. So after Joey spoke and people venerated the medal, we waited until everybody cleared out. And I started talking to him. I reminded him of the miracle. And I said, listen, I work nights. I said, if you need a hand down here, making rosaries or getting packages mailed out, books or whatever, I'll come and help you. So I worked there for about 1.5 years with him every day. And after a while, he saw that we just hit it off. My mother's from Italy, so I'm half Italian. So we just kind of like gelled right from the beginning. And every day was just fun. I learned so many spiritual things with him, but we laughed every day. But I had great access to information between all of the books that Joey was giving out. I got to read every book on Garabandal. I got to talk to Joey personally. I got to see a Conchita occasionally. So I had all of this knowledge, and he said, why don't you start going out there and talking about it? Give me a break a little bit, and
right.
You get out there. You like to talk. You're not.
Well, and you're energetic, so people like it. Yeah.
So that's
and you're 33 years old approximately at this time.
Yeah. So I started doing that, and I said, we should. He says, I'm going to make a video. He says, why don't you see if you can do something with it other than us trying to sell, one at a time to get it out there. And he wouldn't sell them. They basically asked for a donation and just buy more videos with money. It was a nonprofit. So I contacted every major news source in America, and they all turned me down flat about trying to air this video. So I said, well, now what am I going to do? Nobody wants to hear about this. It's religious stuff. And then I said, wait a minute, there's a Catholic channel, EWTN. So I called the president of EWTN, Bill Steltermeyer. I called him every week for 6 months until he finally called Joey Lomangino and said, please
Get this kid
stop
off
this
my
guy
back.
from calling
That's
me.
right.
He's driving me crazy. He says, we'll put you on Mother Angelica's live show one time, but you have to promise he'll leave me alone and stop calling me. So we flew down to EWTN, and it was the highest rated show that Mother Angelica ever had.
Wow.
And they asked us back several times, and the two of them were amazing. They just hit it off right from the get-go.
Ooh, Joey and Mother Angelica?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite story is before the show airs that evening, the live show, Mother invites us to her house for dinner because we had to take an afternoon flight. So there's Joey, his wife Marian, myself, Mother Angelica, Bill Steltermeyer, and just a few other people from EWTN. So Mother turns to Joey and says, Joey, would you like to lead us in a prayer, for dinner? He goes, sure, Mother. He goes, I'd like to start with a 15-decade rosary. and there's dead silence in the room, and everybody's jaw drops, including mine. And then he waits like 5 seconds, which feels like an hour. And he says, nah, I was just kidding. And then he goes into a prayer. And, there's all this nervous laughter.
Everyone's like, I'm hungry.
Yeah. So, right away, it instantly gelled, them getting along, sense of humor. They're both Italian. And it was great. We had just a great relationship with Mother when she was alive. And anytime she was in New York, she'd come over Joey's house and we'd get to see her again. And so she was instrumental in getting the video, disseminated throughout the world. Really, it started in America, and then EWTN was also cast in other countries. So other languages were made, and that's how we got the video out. So and then in 2009, I was telling Joey, this internet is amazing. I can reach more people sitting at home on a chair than down here, trying to contact people. And that's when I asked him and Conchita for permission to start a Facebook page.
Right.
And basically they said, as long as it's Garabandal only, we don't want other apparitions. Not that we don't believe in them, but he says, I just want
This
to
is
be
our focus,
Garabandal
right?
information. So there has to be a focused, site just for this. And that's how it started. And now, I expanded. I think last month I had over 190,000 people now on all the sites, and it's growing now very quickly each month in the 14 languages.
Wow, because God is doing what he's doing. He wants to make sure this message gets out around the world.
Yeah, he's pushing hard now.
Yeah. How old is Conchita?
73.
So is she going to be alive when the miracle happens? Yes, because she has to.
I think so if she's got to tell us 8 days before.
That's what I'm thinking. So we're looking at
it's
a life.
It can't be that far away. I just
She
saw
lives
her
to
on
100.
Sunday.
We're within 27 years. Does she ever give hints as to when she thinks it'll be like sooner than later? She just lives her life.
No, I will tell you one quick story. One day we were having lunch, and not to ask that question of her. If you're friends with her, you just know you don't ask that of her. So we're having lunch, and she off the cuff says, "So when do you think the miracle's going to be?"
She said this, or he
says it to me.
Oh,
I almost choked on my sandwich because I just couldn't believe she would ask me that. And at the time, I had a different level of understanding of all of the factors that go into the miracle date than I do now. So I had given her my date, and just with the greatest deadpan look, there was no reaction. And I just kind of knew I was wrong just because, she had no reaction. But no, she doesn't really talk about that date at all.
Does she keep in touch with the other visionaries?
Well, Jacinta is also 73. That's her cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Jacinta lives in California. So they do stay in touch. The two of them are closer. Mary Cruz Caballero is her last name now. She's married. She lives in Avia, Spain, which is about 100 miles from Garabandal. I don't think that they've spoken in a long time. And unfortunately, Mary Lowley passed away at age 59. She suffered from lupus, and she wound up passing from a lung disease, but she only lived to 59, unfortunately. So, but Conchita and Jacinta still stay in touch.
Yeah. What would you say is the, well, I think you've kind of answered, so let me just rephrase it differently. So of everything that we know, name one thing you would have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today.
Well, you can gain a lot of understanding about Garabandal and what the Blessed Mother is asking from us. If you check out my Facebook page, it's filled.
What is that Facebook page?
It's called The Message of Garabandal.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've done is I post a new post every single day, so that I've got over 1,200 files on Garabandal. So every day I put out a new story, and I always try to work in a lot of stories of what does Mary really want from us. And one of the most amazing things she ever said was in that message that I read earlier, I just want you to lead good lives. It's as simple as that. Of course, penance and sacrifice and doing the rosary and going to mass and confession and frequent communion. These are all important and wonderful things. But what she emphasized more than anything is just lead a good life. And I feel her frustration, because
it's like a mom telling her
kids that much.
Yeah. Just behave, and you can get so many more things. Yeah.
So, like I said, on the site, you'll see mixed in with all the historical events, a lot of Mary's messages about, all of those things about humility and piety and modesty, and just simple things that you should be doing to get to heaven someday.
Yes. Okay, so this one's about you. Okay. It's a fill in the blank. I will know my life is, when I die, I will know my life has been a success
if I make it to heaven.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
There's a great joke that Jesus and St. Peter are walking around heaven, and he's looking around saying, he's here, this one's here, that one's there. He goes, don't blame me, it's your mother. She's sneaking them in the back door.
That's like, my priest just told that at church this week. Yeah, so, Jesus is like, what are all these people for? He's like, I keep closing the door and she keeps opening the windows. you know.
So yeah, I'm hoping she's going to remember me and grab me and pull me in quickly.
Yeah.
For anybody else.
Amen. So if we want people to go find you, go to Facebook and look up The Message of Garabandal. And Glenn tells you it's not about him. He's just the tool here in America that's passing the messages on to, with Conchita's permission, to get as many people to know about this apparition, this series of apparitions as possible. Spread this site with your friends, and go read some of the stories. There's pictures. It's pretty powerful when you read some of the stuff that was said. And all of us, our goal is to get to heaven. We want you to get to heaven, and we have got to be proactive. Whether you believe in these apparitions or not, do as Glenn said, live a good life. That's what our mother wants. That's what Jesus wants. Live a good life, and don't be afraid to correct others, because if it brings about a little bit of persecution, then you'll know you're blessed, because that's what the Lord said in the Beatitude. Blessed are the persecuted. If you're persecuted in his sake, what's the worst that can happen? But you can be applauded in heaven. I want you to share this show with your friends. You're probably watching it on social media, YouTube. Please go also to my Rumble channel, because as many of you already know, we are getting censored, and I don't anticipate my show will be allowed to be on this channel that much longer, because we've already had a show canceled. Many people have. So go to breakfastwithbacon.com and listen to this show, listen to all the other shows. God has given me great guests. Send those shows off. I also want to make sure, while I'm mentioning censorship, you will see when you go to my website, the conference I am organizing with Reagan Long for this October 8th in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Our headliners are all of a sudden Father James Altman, also Abby Johnson. We're going to have Jesse Romero, Leah Darrow, all these powerhouse Catholic speakers. Zachary King, the former satanic high wizard who took part in 147 ritual abortions before his miraculous conversion because of the miraculous medal being handed to him when the world disappeared and our Blessed Mother was standing in front of him. So there are going to be some powerhouse speakers there. And this is not just a rah-rah session. These are people saying, look, this stuff is happening. What are you to do? The laity has to rise up. The world has to change. We cannot rely on our leaders. And if the Catholic Church cannot lead the way, who will? And that's what we're being called to do. So I think I've talked enough. Again, go like and subscribe on all my pages. Please go to the Message of Garabandal page. And if you have any questions, or I've said it too fast, or you can't spell Garabandal, it's right on this show. We will have a link listed. Well, you probably see the link right now below it that will connect you to Glenn's page on Facebook. Love to hear your comments. Tell us if there are other great guests that you would like to have on the show. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life sunny side up.
Sunny side up.
Yes. Hold on.